And there we go. We're starting again now. Yeah, that's recording. Good stuff. Hello, ladies and gents. This is Soren, your chess friend. I am suggesting for today to having a look at the last game in between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Liren, the 18th game that they've played for the title of World Chess Champion. So we're going to look at it from Black's perspective, Ding Liren's perspective, because he's the world champion. So I'd like to having a look in this fashion, guys. So let's do this. Straight into the facts now with e4. By the way, this was a very, very balanced championship. They are equally strong because let me just remind you that Ding Liren won with 9.5 final score, 9.5 to 8.5. So this is an incredibly balanced it was an incredibly balanced championship. They're equally strong. It wasn't like a huge gap in between the two players. It could have gone either way anyway. So you see that was very even, very balanced. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. So of course it could have been played bishop c4, but Ian chose to play bishop b5. So that's the Spanish now. a6. We'll continue right now. Bishop goes on a4 and knight f6. So these are only theoretical lines here. Yeah, there is one thing here. So I wouldn't recommend this for my friends in case you ever wonder what happens if I take the pawn on e4. Well, white may very well reply with rook to e1 or with d4. And it's just slightly uncomfortable here because the blacking hasn't been castled and you don't really want to jump too soon on taking the pawn on e4 because you're just helping white in getting pieces active. Not the end of the world if you decide to go for the pawn, but just, try and pay attention to this, to these ideas. Bishop e7, developing, ready to castle. b5 first, hitting the bishop, so the bishop needs to move. On b3, obviously there is no other square for that bishop. And d6. Okay, very theoretical approach here. Again, we are in the opening stage of the game. a4 challenging the b5 black pawn. Bishop d7. Now, you do want to have a connection here with the rook, just in case anything happens. You are able to take it back, and you've got no problem in replacing the rook if that were to be the case. h3 and castles for black now. Bishop e3, developing is key. So, ladies and gents, when you develop your pieces, you can't go wrong. You can never go wrong when you get your pieces active. Of course, I've said it very many times, as quickly as possible. Very important stuff. Knight to a5, harassing this bishop on b3, attacking it. So bishop retreats on e2, and now pawn takes on a4. B captures a4. Knight to c3, natural developing, hitting a bit the pawn on a4, who's currently defended by the bishop. So they can't take straight away. Rook to b8. So you don't want to keep the rook on the a file now. You want to go on the b file where you could eventually attack something, namely the pawn on b2. Now, if you're thinking about, oh, okay, but why don't I just simply take here? So in case you're wondering, if the black rook were to take on b2, okay, that gives a bit of advantage for white because white takes with the knight on a4. So knight c3 takes on a4, attacking the rook. Okay, so that might be one variation here. So you either retreat now, let's say you go to b8, and then they might be playing knight to c5, attacking your knight on a5 by discovered attack. So that plays a bit into white's favor. So you've got to be careful about this one. Yeah, of course, you could take on b2, but you got to expect this kind of ideas. And you're actually making the white rook quite powerful. So for this reason, Ding Liren chose to play queen e8, b3. Again, theoretical stuff, c5, and knight takes on a4. Knight goes on c6 now. There's no point in keeping the knight here because when the white knight will be playing, the rook will be hitting your knight. So you got to move the knight. Plus, you got better perspective with this guy in case you want to jump on d4 in principle at some point. That's also very much doable. So knight on c3, But fortunately, Liren played the knight on c6 already, so there's no threat over there. He does want to give the pawn, so he pushes to a5, holding onto that pawn for a bit longer. A little bit of readjustment, because probably the knight on d2 would dream of playing maybe on c4, you never know. And also making it possible for the f2 pawn to moving forwards at the right time. Bishop e6, again more developing, knight to c4. Knight to c4, double attack on a5 black pawn. And now he goes for the center. The battle for the center. The position is very, very much almost equal here with something like minus 0.16, minus 0.20, a bit in black's favor, but is absolutely negligible. Knight takes on d5. He saved the bishop. He chose to save the bishop on d2 because the idea would be very nice if black decides to take on c3. You're going to get yourself a nice bishop here. Very dangerous in principle, so it's okay. It's very good to try and save the bishop if you can. Knight c3 and bishop takes on c3 here. So what do we have is the bishop attacking on e5 plus the white knight twice attacking on e5. And black defends it only once. So in the game, the bishop removed one of the attackers. The bishop on e6 removed the knight, which was attacking on e5 twice. Of course, black could have played also f6. That might have been a possibility because you're making a very strong defense here for the e5, but Liren chose to remove the attacker. Removed one of the two attackers on e5. So takes and takes. Now the b file is very much available for the black rook and is looking good. Bishop to d8. The reason being, you want to get this bishop first to defend here twice. Again, we've got a knight and now we've got a bishop, so white can't take on a5. And if there is anything, this bishop on c7 would make a very nice threat, combined possibly with the queen if we manage to make a nice maneuvering, getting the queen together with the bishop, a nice battery attacking along the h2, c7 diagonal. So we're going to get there in a second, guys. Bishop to d2. Bishop c7 and c3. Now, c3 means a couple of things. c3 here means that black knight cannot jump on d4 or b4 at the minute now because the c3 pawn just stopped it. So we can't use the knight to going and attacking in this fashion. The pawn just stops us. And there is another thing. It could be potentially, if the d3 pawn were to be moving forwards, we suddenly have a very, very active bishop. So that's another subtlety, another detail. f5, moving the pawn in front of the black rook now, trying to push the front. Rook goes on the same file with the queen. So you got to be careful because the black queen is on the same file, the same column. You always need to make sure the queen is not there, especially if white threatens, exactly as we discussed, to pushing the d3. You have to be very careful. And rook goes on d8 first. Rook a2. Of course, white could have played also bishop to g5, or very interestingly, bishop to f4, okay, because you can't take really, because the rook would take your queen. Okay, so you might have tried this. Oops, you might have tried this with white, and then bishop g5 also promising to play here. Queen to g6, moving away from the rook's file, and not just moving away. Exactly as we said previously, my chess friends, the black queen wants to slightly readjust itself on a more promising battery. Look at this. Bishop c7, queen to d6. There is a perennial threat here, so white has to be very careful about this very deadly battery. Very important. And how elegantly Liren managed to find a way, moving queen out of danger, then slide over nicely to d6, and now we've got a very dangerous battery. That's the reason that Nepomniachtchi pushed g3, because you want to make sure there won't be any checks on h2. It's way too dangerous. And now Liren moves the rook to e8, exactly where the white queen is. You never know. If you manage to open the e file, that looks quite promising. Queen goes on f3 now. So black will have to be careful maintaining the queen on the 6th rank anyway. Just need to keep an eye on the black knight because the queen is here, so you don't want to drop that piece. Moving forward, takes and knight on e5, very nicely attacking queen, attacking c4, and also having the d3 square available for the same knight. Queen goes, obviously you attack the queen, and knight to d3, hitting the rook directly. Bishop takes, and queen takes now, with further attack on the c4 pawn, and also on the e4. But white took first, trade-offs the queen, trade-off on e1, bishop takes, and queen takes on c4. So this is very, very much, pretty much equal. Again, the reason Jan Nepomniachtchi lost the championship in this game, it will happen very soon. We're going to be discussing that critical moment, in my view, my chess friends, is because the time crisis, I think he went like under a minute at some point, and the blunders are more increasingly likely to happen. So when we get into the time crisis, the rook had to be moved now because queen attacks on e2, and rook takes on f5. Now, this is something that white needs to be careful. This pawn is a pass pawn, so you got to play very carefully, keeping an eye on this pawn forever here. So, I mean, you got to be careful about that one. Bishop to d2. h6, a bit of prophylactic. It's always very good, very important, making sure you're not getting any checks on the back rank because they might be incredibly problematic. So h6 is always a good stuff to do here because if the queen were to check, you're just moving the king nicely on h7. So always a good stuff. Queen to c6, attacking the bishop. Rook to f7, defending the bishop on c7. And they try to get the rook on the e-file again for some possible checks. King goes preemptively, goes on h7 now, so even if you play the rook on e8, you're not going to check anything. Bishop plays on e3, nothing wrong. So up to this moment, the game is perfectly, very nicely, very elegantly, solidly played by both players. No problem. Bishop e5, double attacking on c3. Queen goes on e8. Wanted to say you got to be careful because I'm attacking your rook, and you sort of need to either move the rook away or you got to keep the queen on that diagonal pretty much for a while. Bishop, so he decided to take on c3 the pawn, and now black is boasting 2 free pawns on the queen side. Very important. Now pin, a pin is very good here, and rook to f6. And now Jan played queen to d7, and if you wonder what would happen if Jan chose to play bishop to d2, well, that's actually not a bad move at all, but that would have been a further invitation to another draw here because queen goes to d4, double attack on the bishop, moving away from the pin with the rook, and attacking on f2. And if white would have taken, then we have indeed the perpetual check with queen f2, king goes h1 first, and then f3, and then king goes, and we would have had a perpetual check. So for this reason, probably Jan chose to play queen to d2 rather than bishop d2. Again, very, very equal. Nothing as a problem here. Okay, so let's just move forwards. Queen to e2, queen to d5, bishop plays now very nicely on b4, and queen checks the black king. King moves away, and now Liren decides to play something not for a draw. He actually willingly places the rook in a pin. Look at this. But it's not a dangerous one because at the minute now, white can't put pressure on this rook except the fact that he would go with h4, which unfortunately he didn't. I was expecting, and I think I was doing a live stream during the game, and I was mentioning that actually I would be incredibly tempted to play h4 and h5 right now, not later, which actually the computer considers is a good move. Together with rook to c2 would be again another one because attacks the queen, or king to h2, but none of these have been played. And guys, actually this is the moment where white loses a big tempo. So instead of playing something active like h4, rook c2, and due to time pressure, I'm pretty sure it was due to time issues here, white goes with queen to f5, and probably the idea was at that point in time for Ian to just try and attack on c5, but actually he lost sight of the fact that c5 would be very easily dealt with c4. So the pawn is no longer there, and that means even more. That means now that h4 being played, it's not going to bear any effects here because, yeah, the pin is here, guys. You read it over there. So h4 being played now, there's no danger for h5 coming down because black forces the queens to come off the board with queen d3. And that makes it now very difficult for white. After queen d3, the rook is no longer in danger of being, double attacked with h5 pawn because queen will be moving away. The queen has to move away. And now rook to f6. So they moved away, and now they're attacking on the f and hitting on f2, and it's looking increasingly better for black. So in my view, the critical moment was here. Hold on a second. Here. What move is that? Move number 46. I think Ian was like under 2 minutes now. So h4 is by far the most aggressive choice that white may play. But instead he lost massively a tempo. So losing a tempo matters absolutely. It matters absolutely. Now the evaluation bar goes totally and confidently for black because c4 goes down the board. Again, we've got 2 free pass pawns on the queen side, and h4 is no longer powerful because queen to d3 takes the queen off the board or makes the queen go away from this diagonal. Oh boy, that's it. That was it. c3, absolutely menacing. Queen to g6, obviously black is super happy to trade off everything now with those 2 pawns. Oh boy, you just can't stop it. Right, so now there was just a formality, and time-wise, Ding Liren was doing better than black, surprisingly, because Yan is the quicker player. Queen to c4, check. Okay, so we're going to keep playing for a while here, but these guys are unstoppable now. Very difficult, and especially in the time crisis, in the time pressure issues, this is very, very, very difficult. Very difficult indeed. So Ian tried now to move the queen and the bishop to attack on g7. But he simply couldn't do anything at this stage because of the queen to g6. Oops, hold on a sec. I think he moved too far. Okay. So queen to c4 is just, the time was of the essence here, and always a problem. Now it's pretty much unstoppable. You can't do nothing to stopping those pawns from advancing. Bishop to e5. Takes. Tries desperately to generate any form of pressure, but that's already slightly too late here. This pawn can't take because obviously it's being pinned. And this guy are threatening to become queen. So queen had to take, and after bishop f4, simply white resigned here. There is no way you could continue playing successfully this one for white. So that's an incredibly rich in tactics game. So I've just tried to summarize and make it briefly, guys, for your attention here, signaling probably the most important moment, which in my view for white was the massive loss of a tempo. Was, let me just go back briefly, clicking now. I think move 46, let me just go. That's where I feel is actually the stuff that forced 46, 47. Yes, no, 47. Queen f5. So now at this stage, the engine even says it's plus 0.15 provided you proceed with h4. Now, not later. But queen to f5 actually allows black to turn the table. So That's the problem. Loss of a tempo, loss of the game, and this thing coupled with the time issues for White led to losing the game and led to Liren becoming world champion, which, by the way, it's a very, very much deserving. Equally strong players, wonderful, strong super grandmasters, and it was a very exciting championship. And I've enjoyed very much watching it. And Liren totally deserving the title. So that was it for the time being, my chess friends. That was the Spanish opening. Murphy Defense Martinez variation. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I will see you soon with more chess videos. Thanks very much for watching.